a proud empire. Warriors with a code. Surprise attacks that shocked the world, yet ultimate defeat. How does a nation with early victories and fearless soldiers lose a war? This is not just a story of battles, it's a story of culture, strategy, and a collapse from within. This is why Japan lost. Before the bombs and battles, there was motive, not just conquest. Japan's imperial ambitions before World War II were shaped by a desperate need for resources, especially oil. Japan didn't enter the war simply for glory. It entered because of trade restrictions, and resource shortages threatened its economic survival. But, and this is crucial, Japan did not build a war plan that matched this motive. Instead, it relied on a cultural military ethos that elevated honor and death above strategy. At the heart of Japan's wartime mindset was the legacy of the samurai, the old warrior code, the belief it is more honorable to die than to surrender. That cultural lens, call it the honor mindset, transformed warfare into a spiritual or moral test, not just a material contest. Many Japanese leaders assumed that willpower, sacrifice, and honor could compensate for material disadvantages. But war isn't philosophy. And in a prolonged, resource-intensive conflict, honor alone isn't enough. One of the fatal flaws was the absence of a grand strategy. Japan lacked a clear definition of what does victory look like. Instead, territorial gains became reactive, a function of what they could seize in the heat of conflict, rather than following a sustainable, long-term plan. This meant Japan overextended itself, fighting in China, Southeast Asia, and across vast oceanic distances, while never really securing the foundations needed to sustain such a widespread empire. Wars are won not only by bullets and bombs, but by fuel, food, ammunition, and supply lines. Japan failed tragically on this front because they neglected the logistics such as supply, transport, and protecting sea lines of communication. By war's end, Japan had lost almost all its transport shipping, leaving the empire effectively paralyzed. Without reliable supply, resources couldn't be moved. Troops couldn't be reinforced. Food and fuel couldn't reach the front lines. Even the bravest soldiers can't fight without bullets. Another major error: internal disunity. The Japanese army and navy, each with different doctrines and loyalties, seldom coordinated. Their war plans were secret from each other, and often built assuming the other would cover the rest. For example, after a successful strike like Pearl Harbor, the Navy planned further ambitious offensives, such as targeting Battle of Midway. The Army opposed, even threatened resignation. But the Navy pressed ahead. The result: catastrophic. At Midway, Japan lost 4 of its aircraft carriers, a third of its carrier force, a blow from which it never recovered. And worse, for months after, the Navy didn't even tell the Army, in a total war. This degree of internal secrecy and distrust undermined any hope of unified defense. As resources dwindled, strategy failed, and morale crumbled, Japan's leadership and troops turned to desperation. When they facing existential collapse, the mindset becomes fight to the death, or nothing. This desperation fueled brutality against enemies, prisoners of war, and occupied populations. Once people are pushed into death ground, they act with ruthless survival instinct. The famed Kamikaze attacks, often framed as acts of fanatical honor, were stark evidence. By war's end, Japan lacked fuel even to properly train pilots. Suicide missions became not ideology, but necessity, because of limited resources. All these failures, cultural, strategic, logistic, organizational, combined over time. Early victories and bold strikes masked deep structural rot. Japan didn't lose because its soldiers weren't brave. It lost because it fought a war it could not sustain. The result: by 1945, Japan was out of fuel, out of supplies, its navy crippled, its people exhausted. Surprise no longer worked. Honor no longer inspired. Reality had caught up. The story of Japan's defeat isn't just about bombs and bullets. It's about what happens when culture, ideology, and honor overshadow realism. It's about the danger of ignoring fundamentals, like logistics, planning, unity. If there's one lesson from this history, it's this: victory isn't won by willpower alone. For a nation to survive and win, it must ground itself in reality, resources, cohesion, strategy, and the ability to adapt. Next time you see tales of heroic sacrifices or last stands, remember, sometimes survival demands pragmatism over pride. Thank you for watching. See you again soon.